There is something a manipulator does before anything else. Before the lies. Before the control. Before you even realize what is happening to you. They do one thing. And it works almost every single time. Not because people are stupid. Not because they are weak. But because this trick targets something deeply human. Something wired into all of us. And once you see it, you will never unsee it. Think about a time someone made you feel incredibly special. They remembered small details about you. They listened like you were the only person in the room. They made you feel understood in a way few people ever had. And then slowly, something shifted. You started trying harder. You started questioning yourself. You started wondering what you did wrong. But here is the truth nobody told you. You did nothing wrong. You were simply the target of the oldest psychological trick in the manipulator's playbook. And it starts not with cruelty. Not with aggression. It starts with warmth. Psychology calls it idealization. But manipulators don't read textbooks. They don't sit down and plan it like a strategy. For many of them, it is instinctive. Automatic. Almost unconscious. Here is how it works. In the beginning, they mirror you. They study what you need. What you've been missing. What kind of love, respect, or validation you've been quietly starving for. And then they become exactly that. They show up as your missing piece. The human mind reacts powerfully to this. Because when someone seems to truly understand you, your brain releases oxytocin, the bonding chemical. Your guard comes down. Your trust opens up. And you begin to attach. This is not weakness. This is biology. What most people don't realize is that this phase, this beautiful, intoxicating beginning, is not real connection. It is data collection. The manipulator is not falling for you. They are learning you. Filing away your fears, your wounds, your desires. Building a map of your emotional world. So that later, they know exactly which doors to open. And which ones to lock. Observe. Detach. Understand. Remember that phrase. It will matter before this video ends. The first thing a manipulator does is make you feel like nobody has ever truly understood you the way they do. They say things like, "I've never met someone like you. You think differently from everyone else. I feel like I've known you forever." And it feels incredible. Because deep down, most people carry a quiet loneliness. A feeling of being surrounded by people but never fully known. The manipulator finds that door and walks right through it. I once knew a woman, intelligent, self-aware, emotionally strong, who met someone who seemed to read her soul. Within weeks, she felt a bond she had never experienced. Within months, she was confused, anxious, and constantly trying to earn back the warmth that had slowly disappeared. She told me, "I don't know what happened. He just changed." He didn't change. The idealization phase simply ended. And what came next was the real person. Here is something that will change how you see certain conversations. When a manipulator asks you about your past, they are not being curious. They are taking notes. Every painful story you share. Every person who hurt you. Every fear you quietly confess in a moment of vulnerability. It gets stored. Not consciously, always. But it gets stored. And later, when they want to control you, destabilize you, or make you feel small, they reach back into that storage. They use your own words against you. Your own wounds as weapons. Think about someone who always seemed to ask the deepest questions early on. Who wanted to know your insecurities. Your relationship history. Your biggest fears. At the time it felt like intimacy. In reality, it was an interview. Psychology shows that manipulators are often highly skilled at something called empathic mimicry. They appear emotionally intelligent. They seem to feel deeply. But the difference between a genuinely empathetic person and a manipulator is simple. An empathetic person uses your pain to understand you. A manipulator uses your pain to control you. Observe. Detach. Understand, once they have your trust, the temperature changes. And this is where the real psychological damage begins. One day they are warm, present, attentive. The next day they are distant, cold, unreachable. No explanation. No reason you can clearly identify. And what does your mind do? It goes searching for answers. You replay conversations. You analyze your words. You wonder if you said something wrong, did something wrong, was something wrong. This is called intermittent reinforcement. And it is one of the most powerful psychological forces known to behavioral science. The human mind does not become addicted to things that are always present. It becomes addicted to things that are unpredictable. A slot machine pays out sometimes. Not always. And that uncertainty is exactly what makes it impossible to walk away from. Manipulators, knowingly or not, become that slot machine. The warmth returns just enough to keep you hoping. The coldness returns just enough to keep you anxious. And in that cycle of hope and anxiety, you lose something critical. You lose your center. Imagine a man who was confident, grounded, sure of himself before entering a certain relationship. 6 months later, he is checking his phone every few minutes. Rehearsing conversations. Shrinking himself to keep the peace. Nobody broke him suddenly. They broke him gradually. One temperature shift at a time. This one is subtle. And that is exactly what makes it dangerous. A manipulator does not tell you that you are wrong all at once. That would be too obvious. Too easy to detect. Instead, they begin to gently question your perception. That's not what happened. You're too sensitive. You always overthink things. Nobody else sees it the way you do. Repeated over time, these small moments begin to erode something fundamental. Your trust in your own mind. Psychology calls this gaslighting. But the word has become so common that people have forgotten how quietly devastating it actually is. It does not feel like manipulation. It feels like confusion. Like you are losing your grip on what is real. Like your emotions are too big, too irrational, too much. And once a person stops trusting their own perception, the manipulator becomes the only stable reference point in their world. That is not an accident. That is the goal. A woman once described it to me like this. She said, I stopped trusting my own memory. I would remember something clearly, and then wonder if I had imagined it. I started apologizing for things I knew were not my fault. That is not confusion. That is a mind that has been carefully, quietly restructured. Observe. Detach. Understand. No manipulator says, stop seeing your friends. That is too obvious. Too aggressive. Too easy to recognize and resist. Instead, they make your outside relationships feel like a problem. They get quiet when you mention certain people. They make subtle comments that plant seeds of doubt about those closest to you. I just don't think she really has your best interests at heart. He seems like a bad influence on you. I feel like when you spend time with them, you come back different. None of these are direct commands. But they are directions. Over time, your social world shrinks. Not because anyone forced it, but because it slowly became easier to stay close to the manipulator than to manage the emotional weight of keeping other connections alive. And now you are alone with one person. One person who controls the warmth. Who holds your vulnerabilities. Who defines your reality. This is not love. This is architecture. They have built a structure around you so gradually that you never noticed the walls going up. This is the moment many people describe as the most confusing part. You stop asking for things, not because you no longer need them, but because somewhere along the way, asking started to feel like a burden. Like a crime. Like something to be ashamed of. You needed reassurance. And they made you feel needy. You needed honesty. And they made you feel paranoid. You needed consistency. And they made you feel demanding. This is not an accident. The manipulator cannot maintain control over someone who freely expresses their needs. Because a person who knows what they need, and feels safe asking for it, is a person who can also recognize when those needs are never being met. That recognition is dangerous to the manipulator. So the needs get silenced, not through shouting, not through cruelty, but through a slow emotional tax placed on every request you make. A sigh, a withdrawal, a look that says you are too much. Psychology shows that humans are deeply social creatures. We are wired to regulate our behavior based on the emotional responses of those around us. When someone we trust consistently responds to our needs with distance or disappointment, we stop expressing those needs. We begin performing a version of ourselves that is smaller, quieter, less demanding, and we call it being easygoing, but it is not. It is self-erasure, disguised as peace. Think about someone in your life who made you feel like your emotions were always slightly too big, always slightly inconvenient, always just a little too much for the room. Now ask yourself, did you become quieter around them? Did you start editing yourself before you even spoke? That editing, that self-monitoring, that quiet shrinking, that is control. And it did not require a single raised voice. Observe, detach, understand, and this is perhaps the most psychologically sophisticated move of all. Just when you find the strength to pull away, they return, not with grand gestures always. Sometimes it is something small. A message at midnight. A memory they suddenly recalled. A moment of vulnerability that feels so real you begin to question everything you decided. This is called hoovering. Named after the vacuum. Because they suck you back in, and they time it perfectly, not because they are sitting somewhere calculating the exact moment your resolve is weakest, but because manipulators are often deeply attuned to emotional energy. They sense the distance, and distance threatens their control. So the warmth returns, the person you fell for in the beginning makes a brief, beautiful reappearance, and your nervous system, which has been trained through months of intermittent reinforcement to light up at any sign of that warmth, responds immediately. Hope floods back in, and the cycle begins again. I want you to understand something deeply here. This is not a reflection of your intelligence. Some of the most self-aware, emotionally developed people in the world have been caught in this cycle, because it does not target your logic. It targets your longing, and longing is human. Longing is not weakness. Longing is the proof that you are capable of deep connection. The manipulator did not find a fool, they found someone with a heart. And they used it. Here is what most psychology videos will not tell you. Many manipulators are not evil. Some of them are deeply wounded people who learned very early in life that love was not safe. That vulnerability led to pain. That the only way to feel secure was to control the emotional environment around them. That does not excuse the behavior, but it explains it. And understanding why something happens is not the same as accepting it. It is simply how you stop taking it personally. How you stop asking what is wrong with me and start seeing clearly that this was never about you. You were not broken by them because you were flawed. You were targeted because you were open. There is a profound difference. The human mind seeks connection the way the body seeks oxygen. And when someone appears to offer the connection, we move toward them. Naturally. Instinctively. Beautifully. What the manipulator does is intercept that natural human movement and redirect it toward their own emotional needs. But here is what they could never take from you. Your awareness. Because awareness changes everything. The moment you recognize this pattern, something shifts. Not immediately. Not painlessly. But permanently. You start noticing the temperature changes without getting lost in them. You start hearing the subtle reality rewrites without abandoning your own memory. You start feeling the guilt for having needs and recognizing it as planted, not grown. You become an observer of the dynamic instead of a prisoner of it. And that observational distance is not coldness. It is not indifference. It is the most powerful form of self-protection the human mind possesses. When you can watch behavior without being consumed by it, you cannot be controlled by it. This is why the 3 words matter. Observe. Detach. Understand. Not observe and react. Not detach and harden. But understand. Understand that people operate from their wounds as much as their wisdom. Understand that manipulation often lives where genuine love was never modeled. Understand that your sensitivity was never the problem. It was always the target. And now that you see the target, you can protect it. You are not here by accident. Something in this video called to something in you. Maybe a relationship from the past suddenly makes more sense now. Maybe someone in your present life just became clearer. Whatever it is, sit with that. Because clarity is not always comfortable. Sometimes it arrives like a quiet earthquake, rearranging things you thought were solid. But on the other side of that clarity is something rare. Freedom. Not the freedom of never being hurt again, but the freedom of never being confused about what is happening to you again. The manipulator's greatest power was your unawareness. And you just gave that power back to yourself. Observe. Detach. Understand. The wisest people in any room are not the loudest. They are not the most aggressive. They are the ones who watch clearly, feel deeply, and never let anyone rewrite what they know to be true. Be that person. You already have everything it takes. If this video revealed something you have been quietly feeling but could never put into words, type the word "aware" in the comments below. Just that one word. Because someone else will read it. And they will know they are not alone in what they have been through. And if someone in your life needs to see this today, share it with them silently. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do for someone you care about is simply hand them a mirror. Thank you for watching Silent Psychology. The truth was always there. Now you can see it.